It's hard to tell when you look at protests in a totalitarian regime that does everything it possibly can to stop the flow of information, what exactly the situation is. And we are, of course, hoping for the Iranian regime to fall, but it's hard to tell even how much trouble they're really in. One sign that should make you optimistic that maybe they really are in trouble is the fact that Owen Jones, a couple of days ago, has finally decided to do a video on his channel about the protests and tell us how, basically tell us how it's not what we think and it's not going to happen. And also, the protesters are not necessarily the good guys. In fact, they're kind of the bad guys. Yeah, an Owen Jones video, Owen Jones has never met a dictator he didn't love except the ones that ally themselves with the West. So of course and of course, for Owen Jones, the main issue is Jews and specifically the Jewish state and its downfall. So the last thing he wants to see is the downfall of the country most likely to be able to do that, i.e., Iran and the Ayatollah regime. Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm Razi Ginsburg, joined by Daniel Kraus. Daniel, any opening comments? And then we have a lot of clips from two videos that Owen did 2 days in a row, interviewing two different people. They're interesting, let's say. I didn't know who they were. I Googled them. One of them seems to have been an actual, Iranian regime lobbyist, the other more of just a left-wing fanboy of the Iranian regime, both with roots in Iran. Um, so yeah, we're going to listen mostly, unlike most of our Owen Jones videos, we're going to listen mostly to his guests, a few of his questions and the framing of them. But yeah, uh, Daniel.
Yeah, I don't want to poison the well too much. I want this video to be somewhat self-contained. Although it's amazing that Owen Jones found the two ex-Iranians that are actually pro-regime that are living outside of Iran. That's kind of amazing. Although I'm not sure if they grew up in Iran or just were born somewhere else. Um, I mean, just a general thing that I would recommend everybody to think when they listen to something like that is like think about what is the goal of these people. Like people like Owen Jones, like they don't like the West. They don't seemingly like even the Western society. I mean, Owen Jones is a socialist, right? If you are a socialist, you are not pro-Western. You don't want liberal democracy. You don't want uh, uh, even free markets are part free market, both free trade and free enterprise, I think, are at the relatively core of the Western values, industrialism, capitalism. I Once you start going away from that, I think you are leaving the West as well. So, and PC in the chat says he's a communist, which I'm not sure if he like straight up calls himself a communist, because that one has a little bit more attachment. But it's not like socialist is a good label. I don't view socialism as like that's a milder form of communism. Socialist, that's the end goal. If I call somebody socialist, they have no place in intellectual discourse or like a reasonable. That's not a reasonable position for me.
Yeah, thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, Razi, if I was PM, I'd deport Owen to Gaza. As you know, I don't like disagreeing with super chatters, but no, he has the right to say what he says, and should have the right to say that in this country with less fear, that, by the way, than some of us have when we speak. But yeah, it's always good to know who these people are, and we hear this from Owen, even though he tells us it's not what we think. We get to see what goes on in those two videos. Thank you, PC, for another super chat. PC says, Razi, thanks for showing Owen. He makes me feel sick. Yeah, you and me both. And the first clip we have of him in the very beginning, not the very beginning, but early on in the first of those two videos, is an indication of why. Let's take a look.
Relevant. Great to speak to you. How are you doing?
Good to be with you again.
Always great to speak to you. Let's just start with the protests. So I'm interested, how, I guess, organic are they? obviously there is a massive economic crisis going on in Iran, partly sanctions and all the rest of it. And so how much is it to do with, the kind of the economic side, but also the regime? I'm interested, I don't have any love, obviously, for the Iranian regime. Don't we need to make that clear? But I mean, some of the
Well,
protests.
you should make that clear. By the way, this was my whole point. Yeah, this first clip. Usually, Owen does this thing at the beginning of videos where he tells us that he's not telling us what he is telling us and what we can clearly hear him telling us. So he did this. He did this right after October 7th. His first video on October 9th was titled Palestinian Lives Matter, and he gave the, lip service to condemning the atrocities, and then, of course, immediately talked about how the people committing the atrocities are actually the victims, and that's who we should care about. He did this when he talked about the video that the IDF was showing to journalists around the world, the video, a 40-minute video, mostly compiled from Hamas's own footage of what they did on October 7th. And he goes in and says at the beginning, look, I'm not for this, and this is horrible. And then goes into telling us that it's actually not what we think, and it's, Hamas actually didn't do that bad. And then I also remember right after Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO, was murdered, Owen Jones also did a video where at the beginning he says in a kind of sarcastic way that he's not condoning murder. And then, of course, he goes into talking about why this guy was evil and how one thing I remember from that video is how, the people who support Israel are also siding with him on this. Yes, that makes sense. Oh, and people who are against murder are against murderers, usually universally, whether they're murdering on the streets of New York or invading a country and massacring every single person they come across. Yeah, for Owen, he starts with telling us, look, I'm not a defender of the regime, and then we'll see what he chooses to focus on over the only two videos that he's done since these protests started a couple of weeks ago, and both of them were in recent days, which is why I say, he's clearly concerned here about something. By the way, you noticed even there, even before he told us that he's not for the regime, he's talking about the economic situation being, in part because of sanctions, and which is, it's two statements in one. It's the regime is not responsible for what it has created. It's the regime's enemies that it keeps threatening, and that basically the protests are not ideological. They're just because people are hungry, so they're protesting.
Yeah, and also what is really the justification here? Although I'll start with specifically the sanctions, but I love it. The fall or the crisis in Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, whatever, is because Western sanctions. For some reason, there is not a single Western country that is like suffering because totalitarian states put the sanctions on them. For some reason, it's on. And again, what is this socialist telling us? Iran is suffering because it cannot trade with capitalist countries. Is that the thing? Is that what we want to promote? Like trade with like this is free trade. This is capitalism. Like what is he talking about? So there's that, and yeah, even like generally, like what point is he even making? Like whose fault is it that there are sanctions there? They weren't the same kind of sanctions on the regime before, and even if we don't want to go with the regime before, they weren't the same type of sanctions when there was the Obama deal, after which Iran continued to enrich uranium. So isn't that the fault? Or is Iranian regime just not responsible for its action? Maybe this is the result of people not agreeing with the steps the Iranian regime is taking. Maybe they want to some replacement. Maybe it's not even completely falling off the regime. Maybe they just want some different kind of regime. But is the fact that he like nudges the thing of because of like economic sanctions, which also separately, like do states not have agency over them? Like do states have, well, the states have obligation to follow, to freely trade, to allow their people to freely trade with people from another country. I'm wondering where this extreme would take Owen Jones to if we followed this to its logical extension.
Yeah, and we're going to hear more later on along the lines of socialism is failing because capitalism isn't trading with it, or capitalists aren't trading with it. But remember, Owen Jones is an advocate of sanctions in the Middle East. He's just not an advocate of sanctions on Islamic, oppressive, murderous regimes in the Middle East. He's on the side of sanctions against the one country where he wouldn't be thrown off a roof or at least thrown in prison. Okay, let's hear whatever the next clip is. As I mentioned, we have a lot of clips from both shows, but we will go through all of them, hopefully.
Of what is seen, what is happening, and how it's being promoted. We now have the receipts of seeing that there was a tremendous amount of manipulation taking place during the Masa Amini protest, primarily by Israel. And I think we're seeing that again. I think there's a very deliberate effort to give the impression that the son of the former Shah is a key figure in all of this. I don't think he is. I think he's very much trying to portray himself as such. I think there definitely is an element of support for him amongst the protesters. I don't think it's a majority, and I think the supporters have also worked. These bots, etc., have also done everything they can to crowd out internal voices and just put forward Reza Pahlavi. I think this has become particularly important for them after they saw that Trump took
Okay.
over Venezuela.
Yeah, we'll get to the Venezuela arguments as well, but yeah, we see this throughout those two videos, which is, like Owen did at the beginning, as I mentioned, this thing that Tucker Carlson, we talk about him a lot. He always, when he's arguing for something, he's saying, I'm not arguing for this, I'm just asking questions. It's more convincing when Owen does it, at least to me, because he's better spoken and less cackly. But yeah, you chose not to do anything about these protests for 2 weeks, and then to do two videos where this is the running theme, downplaying uh, the protests, downplaying the support for Pahlavi, and of course, we'll see the other accusations that come along with the opposition, Owen Jones and his guests' opposition to the protesters. Thank you, PC, for another super chat. PC says, Razi, the guy Owen is with is not good. Yeah, again, I Googled him. Both of the guys, we're gonna see another one. They're, like I said, look, they are people who are of Iranian descent, if not left Iran themselves. I don't know, or I don't remember if it was mentioned. In the West, advocating for this regime. So yeah, and thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat.
Yeah, this guy Trita Parsi, he talked about manipulation, which I'm not sure if he specifically meant this about Israel or specifically if it meant with Reza Pahlavi, and this sort of campaign around him. But even then, like, shouldn't we want to support them? Shouldn't we want to? I mean, I'm not sure if manipulate is the right word, but yeah, use some subversive effects against the Iranian regime to support the people of Iran that are standing up to, again, what does Iran stand for but totalitarian Islamic dictatorship? I mean, there is nothing else. That's what it is. Even if, for some reason, and, there are valid criticism of the former regime. So even if you, let's say, do not want that one to come back, and, you don't want Reza Pahlavi to play any role, although my understanding is that he would support both republic and monarchy, and would want it to be secular and democratic. But let's say, he's like lying and would become some totalitarian dictator. Well, one, wouldn't the people stand up again if they're already like standing up against a dictatorship? So there's that, but yeah, like that would be my like biggest thing. What like wouldn't you want to support? I don't know. Like I've seen Owen Jones. He had the video on the Minnesota ice shooting of the woman, and I haven't watched it, so I'm not sure what his commentary was. But I'll go on a lip and would say that he would support some protest against ICE or some protest against the American administration right now. And to some extent, I might even agree with him. Maybe not with specifically this being the reason, but sort of generally against ICE or even against current administration. But wouldn't that be the same thing that we are trying to tell other country or use submersive measures in other country to like support these protests? I mean, we have certain values. I have a certain view of the world that I would like to see. And if I see people standing up and going against that I want to support it. That's why we do these shows. I want the Iranian people to, or as I always say, I want the best within Iranian people to stand up. Hopefully, it will turn into something better, and I think it has a chance. And I would do that everywhere. I would support the Hong Kong protests that were happening in China. I would support. I mean, I was kind of young then, but Euromaidan in Ukraine. I would. The current protests in Slovakia I'm supporting. There's a bunch of protests all over the world that I might be in favor of and some that I might not be in favor of. But he's doing that like, oh, I'm not really, but no, you're kind of going against these protests. Like, what do you want to see? Would you be rather if there was nothing right now? People should just accept their lot and go with the flow, or would rather like just accept what's happening in Iran?
Yeah, and again, he's not kind of going against these protesters. He's full on going against these protesters. He's choosing what he's going to be saying about them, which again, for 2 weeks was nothing, and now, by the way, the clip, I don't think we showed that part, but we didn't actually. But he starts with, um, yeah, it hasn't really been in the news because of Venezuela and other, I don't remember what else he mentioned as news stories. He's already explaining to us why the news is completely ignoring what should have been the most, the major story of the past couple of weeks. So, and then when he is discussing it again in those two videos, he focuses on what we see here. And before we see some more, somebody in the chat says, Owen Jones won't tell me when the next gay pride parade uh, in Gaza is. I didn't ask. I did ask, but he blocked me from Twitter. Yeah, welcome to the club. That is Owen. He doesn't want to be challenged because he knows what he's doing. Again, he's not a naive kid who saw something on television and looked at people, experiencing discomfort and then decided that whoever we think is doing this to them is responsible. This is somebody who is an ideological propagandist, and he knows what he's doing. And let's hear some more of him doing his thing or his guest.
Yeah, I mean, this is something him and Tucker Carlson share, right? They don't want to see gay pride parades in Caracas, Tehran, or Gaza City. That's, something they can agree on for different well, not even different kind of reasons, really. But yeah, let's switch more.
Set aside, but I have to bring it back in, which is Israel. In the case of the Israelis, I do think that there is almost a certainty that they will try to attack again. Let me explain why I think this is the case. The initial attack on Iran at the end of the day was not a success for the Israelis. There's a lot of tactical successes they can point to, but the overarching goal was to make sure that they eliminated Iran as a challenger of Israeli maneuverability and hegemony in the region. Turn Iran into a country similar to Lebanon and Syria, which are countries that Israel can attack at will, with impunity, and without American involvement. And that last part is very crucial. I don't think the Israelis felt that they could achieve that in one go. I do think that they thought that they're going to be able to achieve it, go further in achieving it than what they did. And part of the reason why they didn't is because of the effectiveness of Iran's missiles. Really imposed significant damage on the Israelis. I mean, if you take a look at Gaza, for 2 years,
I want to pause here
Israelis.
for a second because really, this is the kind of thing, and Owen doesn't challenge him on this at all, by the way. He actually doubles down. We'll hear it later. But this is the kind of thing you can only say to an audience who gets their news from you. I mean, I think again, he and Owen live in the world they want to create, basically, and imagine that their audience didn't follow this war. I mean, so we've talked about this before, but when according to reports, when the Israeli intelligence presented to Netanyahu what they thought was going to happen in this war, they were talking about potentially thousands of civilians deaths in Israel. They were talking about the possibility of planes being taken down, of pilots being taken hostage in Iran, and they still decided to do it because that was not as bad as what they thought would happen and were likely right would happen if this war happened on Iranian timeline. And remember, Iran has death to Israel as part of its official slogan. So that war would happen at some point, one way or the other. Um, the number of deaths was 24, if I remember correctly, right?
On Wikipedia right now, I see 32 and one off-duty soldier.
Okay.
32 civilians and one
Okay.
off-duty soldier.
Which is horrible, and the damage caused, is horrible, but is again nothing compared to what was expected. And the fact that Israel had zero casualties, in its military, and was at the point where it was flying around Iranian airspace as freely as it flies around Israeli airspace. I mean,
Yeah, but by the way, the military casualties are 2 drones being shot down, 2 Hermes drones being shot down, as per Israel. While on the Iranian side, Israel says 950 drones, 200 plus ballistic missiles launchers destroyed, 120 SAM launchers destroyed, 8 helicopters, 5 fighter jets, two different fighter jets, 5 F-14s, 2 F-5s, and 1 aircraft destroyed.
yeah.
Not to mention actually attacking the nuclear sites.
Yeah, and not to mention removing the entire leadership of the military and killing so many key figures. So yeah, what happened, and you know what? Let this guy talk a bit more, and we'll talk about what he said and what they said later on. But their revisionist history of this war that just happened a few months ago, that we all were watching daily, is really a statement of what these people think of their audience. Thank you, PC, for another super chat. PC says, Razi, this guy founded the Iranian American Council. Is basically pro-Islamic Republic of Iran. I Googled it. Yeah, I saw that. And again, this is Owen making a statement. He's just asking questions, but he's not just asking questions, but when he's asking questions, he's asking questions in the conversation that he chooses to have with the guests that he chooses to have because he wants to lead the audience into a certain perspective. And that perspective and that side that he wants them to take is the protesters are probably not going to be successful, but most importantly, we don't really necessarily want them to be successful. And of course, he clearly doesn't. Let's Daniel, thoughts on that, and then, or do you want to continue?
Let's just go.
Any ceasefire. And immediately after the ceasefire, they violated it and managed to get out of it entirely after a couple of weeks in most cases. Same thing with Lebanon, but in this case, already after 9 or 10 days, the Israelis started floating the idea of a ceasefire. So, and why is that? And I think the fundamental answer to that is because this was costly to Israel. This was not as simple as they thought it was going to be. But this then means, instead of it having, the fact that there's a degree of balance between the two sides, that means that there won't be another war. That may have been the case under normal circumstances. But given what Israel's security doctrine is, which is it does not tolerate that any country in the region can challenge Israel's maneuverability, can deter Israel, that Israel has to have absolute security, and that necessitates that everyone else has absolute insecurity vis-a-vis Israel.
Okay.
Cannot.
That's again, these people will show you their whole philosophy of life and everything to do with it in such statements. No, it's only in your zero-sum thinking world that Israel's security requires insecurity for everybody else. Remember, Israel has been a nuclear power allegedly for 60 years or so, and has not nuked anybody. Whereas with other countries, this is in their official slogan. By the way, not mentioned as far as I could tell anywhere in either of those videos, the fact that the Iranian regime officially calls death to America and death to Israel. Completely ignores this. But yeah, No, Israel's security doesn't require lack of security for others. It requires others to stop loving death more than we love life, as they tell us.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And again, what is this even like trying to say? Like, there's what was the quote? Did I write it down? They want to like make sure no country can like challenge Israel. Yeah, because if in the history of Middle East in the last 100 years there was a country that was able to challenge Israel, Israel would no longer exist. If during the War of Independence, any of the countries was able to actually fight against Israel properly, Israel wouldn't exist. If in 67 the countries were able to properly fight against Israel, Israel would no longer exist. In 73, the Yom Kippur, if they were able to fight, and there was the war that was really bad on Israel, like Israel was actually in the existential war. If the countries were actually more capable, Israel would no longer exist. If Hamas was more capable, if Hezbollah was more capable, if Iran was more capable, Israel would no longer exist. So, I mean, even looking into it like complete realpolitik, of course, like Israel would want it. But the fact is, despite the fact that Israel is this capable, somehow Egypt got back Sinai, somehow, Lebanon still exists, somehow the Syrian regime was able to change. I mean, I'm not sure if they already talk about this or if it's in the next video, we can mention it, that specifically Syria. But yeah, of course, like Israel wants to be safe because not being safe means the end of Israel. Like, are we gonna criticize, Ukraine also wants to shut down Russian defenses and wants to make sure Russia cannot threaten its defenses? Are we also gonna talk about that? Or, do we, once we compare it to something else, once Jews are not involved, we understand that, yeah, maybe a country wants to be able to defend itself or wants to even prevent, I mean, that's the best way to actually do it, prevent war, existential war, if possible.
Yeah, by the way, in downplaying what Israel did in the war, this guy also mentions that with 9, 10 days into it, Israel was floating the idea of a ceasefire. Israel was not floating the idea of a ceasefire. This is, the people who think the US and America are basically one and the same, would argue something like this because Trump was talking about, the time for peace is now. I think he did that after the US got involved, but yeah, Israel was, weeks at best or at worst, weeks from just taking down this regime. And Trump actually, one of the reasons why he pushed for peace, according to him, was he said, I don't like regime change. Regime change is messy. So he would rather, according to that statement at least, keep this totalitarian regime in place than have it removed by Israel. And that's why there was a ceasefire. The ceasefire was imposed on Israel. It wasn't imposed on Iran, and it was imposed by Trump. So let's keep that in mind. And yeah, there's more of that.
Yeah, and also like separately, there was nothing else to do. I mean, short of Israel actually attacking the oil sites or actually targeting the regime itself and committing to regime change, what else was they supposed to do? They have no longer any air defenses. They lost most of their military leadership. Like what else was that, like job finished in this in a sense. I mean, job finished not in the what should have actually happened, but sort of from like the goal side. Like let's assume somehow Hamas was destroyed in Gaza and Israel would go to ceasefire after. I mean, that was the goal of ceasefire. It was a wrong goal, but why would you accept they wouldn't go for peace after Hamas was destroyed? Which again, wrong goal, but working in the framework, that's what it is. Okay, let's watch more.
In terms of Israel achieving the goals, the strategic goals that you're discussing there, I mean, how likely do you think that would be? Because as you say, it wasn't straightforward last time. And, Israel actually incurred a significant amount of damage, more damage than I think probably the Israeli military and the Israeli state anticipated. But do you think this time, actually, given they haven't been able to rebuild Iran, obviously from the damage they endured last time, that actually Israel this time would just keep on going and would have a good chance of basically eliminating Iran as a significant strategic opponent?
We don't
Okay.
know, because at the end of
Yeah, so again, he is straight up lying here. Like, we know what the Israelis were expecting to happen in that war, and we know it was much worse. And we know also that the reason for the timing of it was because Iran was about to, start producing much more, uh, or improving its ballistic missile capabilities in both stockpiles and launching capabilities. And this is why it was done despite really, really severe warnings. I mean, yeah, it's they just lie and they can get away with it because they know their audience.
Uh, yeah, I don't even think I can really throw anything else there.
All right, let's go to the next clip then.
absolutely crystal clear. The Israelis are not looking for a democratic Iran. I think they're just using this, Reza Pahlavi and that movement to give a degree of legitimacy for what they're trying to do. They're not, I mean, would they be happy to have like a complete stooge in power that they would be in control over? Probably, but they would probably also recognize that that is not a sustainable situation. That entity would fall at some point. And then you might still have a unified Iran that would still have the capability of being a challenge to you. What you want instead is not regime change, but regime collapse, the collapse of the state as a whole. That very well could lead to civil war, which would be totally fine for them because that means that Iran's power would be consumed internally and their ability to project power in the region would more or less be eliminated, just like what happened with Iraq. No one is talking about Iraq as a threat any longer because the country, even though it's starting to pick itself up, is just been destroyed. Same thing with Syria. The first thing the Israelis did as soon as Assad fell, they went in and they bombed everything they could militarily to make sure that whatever government would come in place of Assad would not be able to pose a challenge to Israel's dominance. And right now, we're seeing clear efforts in which they have also tried to destabilize Syria and make sure that the government will never be in control of the country as a whole, while they have annexed larger parts of Syria. The same
Okay.
thing for
Okay.
Iran.
I don't know which lies to start from, but let's start with the easy one that I remember because it was last. No, Israel didn't annex any part of Syria since it annexed the Golan Heights. I don't know how many decades ago. It has occupied parts of Syria and is holding on to it for military reasons. You can challenge that, but you're not challenging that. You're lying about it because, what are you going to do? Actually, talk about the reasons why Israel did what it did. Yes, as soon as the regime collapsed, Israel made sure that in Syria, Israel made sure that whatever replaces it can't pose a threat, not a challenge. He used the word challenge on purpose, by the way, not a challenge, but a threat, because Syria in the past has gone to war with Israel. Every single time it was, from Syria's on Syria's initiative and the initiative of Israel's other neighbors. So what Israel wanted to make sure was that this threat is removed, and it, to a large extent, has been. Now, when he talks about Iran, uh, what was it? Israel would be fine with civil war. Look, the job of a government is to protect its own citizens. Civil war in Iran means death to Israel. The part of the official slogan of Iran is less likely to happen while they're busy there. Now, that doesn't. I certainly don't think anybody wants civil war in Iran because there's a better alternative, which is a free Iran that is an ally to the West. That's what scares Owen Jones more than anything. Uh, and I think it's obvious that that's preferable. But yes, to a regime that says death to Israel and all it plans and all the resources that it has go into making that happen, yeah, the removal of that threat is what the government is for.
Yeah, I mean, what he's saying is something is a concept that I do not really know how to pronounce. It's like lateralism. Basically, the idea that there should be multiple superpowers in the world that are like actively challenging in each other. And no, I don't like that. I want NATO, I want America, I want Israel to be number one because that's the countries I have the most belief in actually doing what's proper when it comes to foreign policy, even though they oftentimes suck. I do not want some kind of another Cold War situation where we have two superpowers and are an actual threat of escalation in the bad sense. So no, I do not want, like, what does it mean Iran to like this part? They actually clipped. Owen Jones clipped this specific part and posted it on his YouTube channel and Twitter. And when he says Iran project power or something like that, they show a map where they show Iraqi militias, they show Hezbollah, and I think they would have shown the Houthis if it was possible. How is that something good? Like, are we actually saying that like Iranian support of the Houthis, of the Iraqi militias, of Hezbollah is a good thing? That's a good way of Iran to project a power because it like challenges the West or challenges Israel? Terrorist organizations that are actively harming both Lebanon, Yemen, and international community, and that's somehow good because it's at least it's standing up to Israel. Like this was what I found the most insane. That not only that they say this, they put a map with them actually like that was supposed to be silent. Like I don't think whoever made that clip, I don't think they really thought this through because this is like the silent part out loud, like the fact that yeah, Iran supports terrorist organization. This is what Iranian projection of power is, like supporting terrorist organizations.
Yeah, Daniel, welcome to the Owen Jones party. I mean, we've been talking about this for over 2 years. This is what he supports. Again,
Yeah, but you would never say it out loud, right? Like you say you hate America, you don't say America deserved 9/11.
Well, it depends on the person, but Owen, again, we talked at the beginning. Owen has this style of saying, "Look, this isn't what I'm saying," but then saying just that, and that's I go back to this all the time because it's important to remember what people said immediately on and after October 7th. Uh, that really should go into your judgment of them, especially when, of course, they pretend to now be against certain military actions because women and children die. These are people who supported the savage massacre that started this war, and that's what Owen Jones did. That is his first response was Palestinian lives matter. The lives of the murderers matter. Stop focusing on the people being murdered. And again, it's an Owen Jones thing. It's a running theme throughout all of his commentary. Speaking of which, yeah,
Well, I would just we are by the way switching to the other video, and one thing because did he mention Syria or what Israel has done after the fall of Syrian regime?
yes, yeah, he
Yeah,
did.
yeah. So I'll comment on that because he said like Israel like destroyed everything in Syria. What do you mean? They like destroyed civilian infrastructure or like hospitals or like schools? No, they destroyed military equipment so a terrorist organization that came from Al-Qaeda wouldn't get hold of them. Like this shouldn't be something we are like discussing. All other countries should have done so. Why are we in favor of like actual Al Qaeda getting hold of like weapons? Like why is this like a preferable thing? Why is it always that yeah, these people like straight up want like terrorist organization or Islamist factions to be able to project their power? Like even as a socialist, like why why are you a fan of they because they have a close relatives but like even if you are socialist and that's the worst thing, right? Because like Owen Jones, he's not pro Britain. He doesn't care about well-being of Britain, English people, or even British people generally. He wants it destroyed. Like that's what he wants. Because like I cannot find like why would you ever be in favor of Iran if you are like a British, let's say pro-British person, even in your socialist view of Britain. Like Iran will still hate you even if you become completely friendly.
Yeah. Again, this always brings me back to the that conversation. Well, if Hitler had been more rational, maybe he wouldn't have gone over against all these countries at once. Maybe he would have done. Yeah, these people aren't rational to begin with. So of course, Owen Jones is a socialist who supports theocrats. It's and it does make sense. Totalitarianism. Totalitarians favor totalitarianism over freedom. And, then we can argue about the types of totalitarianism. Now, we were going to go through some clips in the second video, and try to say where they're wrong, but somebody in the chat says, I love Owen Jones and support his views 100%. So now I'm convinced, so I think we should yeah, shut it down maybe and go cheer Owen. All right, second video.
Oh man, I thought we were actually gonna quit. All right, let's watch the second one.
Bigger protests. And then what we interestingly have also seen is that the government has been, in a way, up until now, somewhat restrained in terms of the brutality and repression that it has used in the past. So this is in a context where, Pezeshkian, a reformist within the system, is president, where he's kind of pushed for, easing social restrictions, easing some kind of political and speech restrictions, and kind of overseeing certain economic surgeries and economic reforms that have been painful, but basically reforming Iran's kind of very corruption-inducing subsidy system, which we can get into later.
Okay, let's pause. Let's pause quickly.
so-
We'll hear more of this, I believe, of this clip. But yeah, in the first video, you heard, and you'll hear this in the second video as well. Why the protesters are not serious and it's not going to work, or they're not ideological. I don't know if they said they're not serious. And how Israel is behind the protests, and Israel is behind the Shah and or the Shah's son. But yeah, you have to have the other side of it, which is, what about the current regime? And this guy, unlike the previous one, actually gives us an answer. The president, Pezeshkian, is a reformer. He is trying to, remove restrictions on speech. This was actually said here. I mean, holy shit. Seriously, these guys have no shame whatsoever in their advocacy for, again, people who are right now shooting protesters. Daniel.
Yeah, and again, this is kind of thing like when it comes to liars or when it comes to dishonest people, something to realize, it's hard to hold everything in integrity and everything in context, because at some point you encounter reality and things start going against each other, because there's only one reality, there's only one truth. So unless you are committed to truth and you can like unify your whole idea, it starts fighting with each other. Because what is he saying here? Let's assume that Pezeshkian, and he is from the reformist faction, whatever, but let's say he is like the more reformist. So was the Mossad agent helicopter justified in what he did? Because if people don't remember, the previous president of Iran died in a helicopter crash. We don't know what caused it, but possibly, let's say, Israeli involvement. So are we saying that Israel intervening in Iranian domestic politics to take out the worst parts of its regime would actually be beneficial for the people of Iran?
Well, yeah. The thing with Owen, like you mentioned, he is very good at not just lying in what he says, but lying in what he chooses not to say and what he chooses not to focus on. And again, like this guy, remember the first of those two videos, he started by telling us, obviously, I'm not a fan of the regime, and I don't think I need to even say that. Well, you do need to say that, Owen, because all you're telling us is about the protesters not being serious in the regime, or not being Israeli funded, and the regime being reformers, and again Israeli funded. Not a bad thing, but bad in Owen's views. Okay.
Yeah, and I would only add, because he also mentioned, the corruption in Iran. Like, really, is that the problem in Iran? Corruption, not totalitarianism, not the authoritarian control of the economy, not the suppression of speech, not the suppression of civil liberties. Corruption? Really? Is that what we're gonna go with? And of course, like, corruption is institutionalized in Iran, as in every authoritarian state. Once the government takes over business, takes over civil liberties, takes over the control of the economy in any way, shape, or form, you're gonna have corruption. There is no other way. Because how does a government decide what is a proper thing to do? Like, it cannot. There's and not even like there's so many variables that you like cannot decide, but like literally government can have infinite amount of different goals, and based on that it can it can decide a million different things to do. So at the end of the day, it's gonna be corruption.
Thank you, Daniel, for the super chat. Daniel says Pahlavi's nickname in some circles, son of dad. Yeah, I don't know if that's a compliment. Look, actually, there's some talk about the regime, the previous regime that I want to wait for later on. The person who told us she's an Owen Jones fan says, "I only believe in international law and human rights, justice for all, equality for all, civil rights for all." Okay, once you get past the slogans, and by the way, even listening to us, although I'm not sure you're listening, is a step in the right direction. Once you get past the slogans, you see, no, if you are a fan of Owen Jones, you're not a fan of rights for all or for anybody. You're a fan of a person who is an advocate for all the regimes in the world, or at least many of the regimes in the world that violate the rights of their citizens in the most horrific ways, and of course are a threat to other countries. But yeah, I see that you're also calling this a Mossad psyop. Okay, we can see who you are. Let's see who Owen and his guests are.
Yeah, and I would only say on the whole, like this like being a Mossad psyop. Like I talked personally with people from Iran. None of them are fans of the system. Like none of them actually like. Well, I talked to them because they left Iran. Like nobody is actually like fan of the system itself. So what are you saying? And again, what are you saying about the people who are actually raising up, who are actually trying to take some agency in their lives in a dictatorship? Like, is every single thing, all the revolutions that happen against the communist governments, are all of them CIA, Mossad psyops? Was the Euromaidan in Ukraine a psyop? Well, some people are saying that, right? That's the most disgusting thing, I think. Like taking the agency from the people who decided they no longer want to live in this kind of system and trying to stand up, even if they do not maybe have the even if they maybe do not want what exactly we want. The student revolution or student rebellion in China that happened. Those people most likely wouldn't exactly stand for exactly what I am. But I stood up to an authoritarian state, and trying to say that this is all just they don't have volition, they don't have control over their lives. It's just some outside influence. It's disgusting. Oh, yeah, I want to watch more.
Yeah.
Oh, the security forces are defecting, whatever. But I don't think that is not what was happening. I mean, there was tactical restraints, I would argue, from the government, and I can, I'll explain why and why that changed yesterday. Because even yesterday, what happened yesterday was, these protests have been continuing. They've had momentum, and then Reza Pahlavi, actually, so this former crown prince, the son of the former Shah, called for demonstrations, and people for the first time really turned out, because he's called for demonstrations dozens of times over the past many years. So for the first time, and we can get into like, is that because of his call? Is that for other factors? We can get into that. But regardless, there were sizable numbers, videos on social media that I've seen. It's hard to ascertain, but in the thousands of people, hundreds of low thousands of people in Tehran and Mashhad and other big cities. And the interesting thing is that initially, it seemed from the videos that I was watching, similar to what had been going on in the past like day or two, security forces were not intervening. And then you saw the internet goes out, harsh clampdown, which by all accounts is ongoing. The internet is still largely, and this is a internet restriction. And again, I can go into more detail about these internet restrictions that is more severe than anyone we'd seen, for example, in the Women Life Freedom movement. And it goes back really to that 2019 November fuel price hike protest, where basically the internet, when it comes to networks connected to from outside of the country, is cut off. They have this domestic intranet, which was even affected, but now seems to be at least partly back online, and domestic messengers. But now it seems like, so I think their calculation, the government's calculation, is really talking not to their diehard base, which I would argue that the diehard base of the Islamic Republic is probably like 20% of the population, maybe 20, 30%. And the diehard opponents arguably are bigger than they have been. And maybe you can, it's a very polarized society, and arguably they are probably 20 to 30% too. These are my speculations that I would argue are informed speculations, but regardless for the purpose of this. But I think, there's this middle of Iranian society that what direction they go in, this 50 to 60% that is deeply discontent as well, but that is worried about taking to the streets, instability. The record of Iran in the modern era has been a concern, something that worries many people, to return to conditions of war and strife and all of that. So I think, the part of the government's game in Pezeshkian has been to, as a prelude to harsh crackdown, be like, we allowed some protests. We were, they became riots, quote unquote. They were violent. But regardless, I think, it remains, we'll have to see how it plays out. I think ultimately it's going to depend on where a critical mass of Iranians go. Like if the government represses harshly.
Okay, there's first of all, no, it's not a numbers game. It's small minorities can make a change. If the masses are staying at home, that means something. That's a statement of their own. So yeah. Oh, if 50 to 60, by the way, his numbers, I don't know how informed they are, but even if we take them at face value, that doesn't 20 to 30% is a lot. If they're all out in the street, if some of them are among the law enforcement, and if Israel or the US do what needs to be done now, then this is enough to change things. There was something interesting at the beginning of this clip. He says that police were showing restraint. Again, this is a running theme here. He's downplaying what the regime is doing to the protesters. But then he said, and then Pahlavi called for protest, and for the first time, people came out because in the past he's tried it and nobody's come out. This again is downplaying the appeal of Pahlavi, and it is done for a reason. He wants you to believe, and he wants people, the viewers of Owen Jones's channel, to believe that that this isn't somebody who people want instead of the current regime. And again, with protests, you never know, and they do have 100% certainty. They have different views on what the country should be after the regime among the protesters, but it's clear everybody out there does want this regime gone. So, yeah, unfortunate attempts to tell us a different story than what our eyes see.
Yeah, I would only add, look at the way he's like talking about the numbers, right? They showed up in thousands in Tehran, low thousands. Like, what are you saying? Like, there's like tens of thousands of that. There are like cities that are completely taken over by the protesters at this point. And he's like trying, like, if this was low thousands of people on the streets of Tehran, we wouldn't be talking about this. Like, low thousands is nothing. Like, that's not I mean, it's like a demonstration. That's and especially if it goes for like several days, this is not like the same 1,000 people on the street of Tehran like doing this. No, it's like people are mobilizing, more and more people are joining. So yeah, even the sort of like a downplaying nature of this, which again, even if it is this big, it might not actually result in the fall of Iranian regime, but trying to say, yeah, like low thousands is like a ridiculous thing to say. Like I said, we wouldn't be talking about this if it was just that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's play another clip.
How much is that to do with the sanctions which have been imposed on the country, and how much is corruption, for example, by Iranian officials, which is also obviously caused huge anger?
Yeah, I mean, I would say sanctions are definitely the decisive factor in terms of the level of economic deterioration in Iran. Obviously, mismanagement, bad government policies, corruption, these things have aggravated them. But the economic conditions that Iran has been under, and I mean, the economic siege, it really is a historically unprecedented economic siege. And same with Venezuela as well. Like people kind of like I saw in The Economist that there was this graph about like, you know, Venezuela's economy was good and then socialism came and then it tanked. I'm like, we're kind of leaving out that there was a major economic siege of Venezuela and, you know, sanctions and policies that were aimed at crumbling the society. And same with Iran. So that, you know, it's been under this maximum pressure campaign from the US since 2018, since that nuclear deal that Obama had negotiated, which gave them some sanctions relief. Trump reneged on that and posed maximum pressure, which has really been a regime change policy and an explicit part of these policies. And many people will say this quiet part out loud. Certainly in this era, you know, like I saw John Fetterman the other day talked about. I mean, the quiet part is that, you know, these sanctions are designed to create unrest and create turmoil and result in regime change. So obviously, like John Fetterman, for example, had a tweet basically saying that, but you know, that is more or less the explicit goal. And so, but with that said, I think we have to be careful not to use that as an excuse or, you know, not to misunderstand where Iranians from Iran are coming from. Because from the vantage point of someone in Iran who has, you know, shitty internet, doesn't have a good job, has, you know, they can't afford basic necessities, it's very rational for them to be like, okay, well, why are we, you know, we have this fight with America. Why do we have this fight with America and Israel? Like, I can't even afford anything. You know, this cost is too high.
Okay. I think this is a good place to pause. Yeah. So again, at the beginning, they talk about sanctions being the reason why Iran is failing economically, and so he's explaining what the real issue is. And then towards the end of that clip, you see him explaining why, you know, those stupid, you know, men on the street, people who don't know what's good for them, why they might not understand the reason for, you know, starting wars with America and Israel, which is Iranian policy. I mean, yeah, this guy, again, going through every aspect of this and trying to see how he can portray it in a way that shows the protesters as either being, you know, paid by Israel and in some way motivated by Israel, or not knowing what's good for them and therefore they're protesting. That's essentially what he is saying at the end. Of course, these people again never say what they mean, but it's not difficult to read between the lines there.
Yeah, and even when he's talking about and I'm not 100% sure. I remember researching some of this, and I believe this is true. When it comes to even specific Venezuela, the sanctions came in much later than the Venezuelan economic collapse. I think in mainly, if I remember correctly, mainly collapsed because the oil prices just went down, and you know Venezuela didn't have, and also. I mean, sort of like the mismanagement, right? Like even when he's talking about like Iran, like bad government policy. Well, what does bad government policy mean? Like, yeah, they should have capitalism. Any kind of authoritarian control over the economy is bad government policy. What does it mean? Or what does it mean? Like, again, and even that, like talking about sanctions. Well, trade with Russia. Trade with China, trade with the other Arab states. Who's stopping you? You can trade with them, although maybe to some extent you can't. But again, like figure it out. Why is the West supposed to trade with these dictatorships? Why is it on Western states and Western individuals on us to like get these dictatorships out of the hole? Like you figure it out. You want this kind of like a government? Well, we don't want to deal with this kind of government.
Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, Razi, it's hard for me to cope with seeing Owen. I get it, but it's important. And it's important because of the impact he has. And by the way, you should look at the pro Owen Jones troll in the chat. Again, we have a policy. We don't read their names out. But look at the things that she is saying. You know, she started by saying, I'm for human rights and civil rights and blah, blah, blah. And she's advocating for Iran and asking, you know, how much better the Middle East would be if Israel didn't exist, and actually specifically saying how many Arabs would not have been killed, which is of course so complete bullshit. The Arabs that got killed by Israel were killed in wars started by the Arabs, but many more Arabs were killed in wars with other Arabs that you don't know and you don't care about because they don't involve Jews. So, you can pretend like Arab lives matter to you, but what really matters to you is Jewish lives and the ending of them. So you don't pay attention to what actually you're pretending to support, but then you are saying where you truly stand, which is you stand with every oppressive regime. I'm assuming, you are a woman. If you were in Iran and showed your hair, you could get shot or at best arrested, or I'm not actually sure which is best, considering, the conditions in Iran. So yeah, that's look, you people can talk about how rights supporting you are, and I'm sure in some mainstream, center right, or whatever they call them, places, they would actually say, yeah, but you don't understand. We hear you. We hear you supporting regimes that kill people for a variety of reasons, including opposing that regime. And we know exactly what that means. Daniel, any other thoughts before we go? I don't know how many more clips we have, but we're gonna keep going, right?
About 6 or 7.
Really? Or did you just want to do the thing?
We have 6 clips
Oh
left.
man. Okay, let's see. Yeah, thoughts, and then let's see what we can get through.
But in the broader situation right now with Trump and Netanyahu, obviously very unabashedly endorsing these protests and kind of claiming to be intervening. I mean, usually you would assume they would try to keep their role and to give legitimacy to protests, but there's no pretense of that. And it's unclear what, that might embolden, in my count, my assessment, is certain minority of protests and protesters. But for that critical mass of Iranian society, that middle part that is discontent, but that is wary of foreign intervention, I think that kind of pushes them further away. I may be wrong. We'll see. But we've seen, for example, like Mike Pompeo, Trump's former, Secretary of State, CIA director, literally tweeted last week that Mossad is on the ground alongside these protesters. So, I mean,
Okay.
bravado.
That's
I mean,
a
obviously,
that's a good enough place to stop. Yeah, we know Mossad is there because we saw in the previous war what Mossad was able to do there. So I don't know why you're surprised, but Trump and Netanyahu unabashedly supporting the protests. Usually they would pretend like they're not. Yes, it's not that difficult for people who are not savages like yourself, who are openly supporting tyranny, to show people standing up to tyranny, and standing against it and saying enough is enough. We've been oppressed for the past 50 years. We are fighting back. It's the obvious thing to do is to support it. And again, if you are not supporting it, that is where the questions should start rising, and they should for hopefully uh, some, at least in Owen Jones's audience. I always we see the people who comment. We don't see everybody who's viewing it, and some people might be looking at it and questioning what they're supporting. I don't know. Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, Razi, sorry, I blocked the troll. I'm not going to name her, but yeah, understandable. Daniel.
Um, yeah, I'm not sure if I have anything to add. Like this is like another thing, like Trump and Netanyahu. Like we should want them to like we should want to support. We should want the Western leaders to call out the evil of dictatorships. Like even if they play no role, let's say take some random leader, Keir Starmer, plays no role in the regime change in Iran, because God forbid he get involved in anything. Let's say he like doesn't do anything. We should want him to call out the fact that Iran is a dictatorship, the fact that Iran violates the rights of their citizens. Like that should be something that the Western states should regularly call out, not just on Israel. We shouldn't just focus on Israel. We should focus on dictatorships, even if it is just calling out that they are dictatorships. And when you see a protest happening, giving your support for the protest. Like that should be the basic thing.
More clips?
Yeah. Oh, wait.
Mossad has lots of influence in Iran, and I don't want to certainly on my end delegitimize any. I think again, these are deep-seated legitimate grievances. The protests are organic, but definitely they're there trying to aggravate everything, and they have their tentacles in there trying to destabilize the country. And ultimately, that's not what the Iranian people want. I mean, the Iranian people obviously want a more secure livelihood, economic stability, prosperity, and stability. I think globally there is this kind of backtracking from aspirations seemingly for democracy or human rights. I mean, Iran's opposition movement, which we can get into this in a bit, like, I would distinguish between Iran's civil society, domestic opposition movement, people who for years have advocated for democratic change and who are real like Democrats, like liberal Democrats but that, I think globally, including in Iranian politics and opposition politics, that's just taken the back seat, right? So you have someone like Reza Pahlavi who doesn't even make any pretense to have that kind of rhetoric. And for many Iranians, I think, if they can get even a strongman kind of leader who can bring them stability, bring them economic prosperity, good relations with the rest of the world, America, get them out from under sanctions, that's enough, So that is one change I've noticed in Iran and Iranian opposition politics, as well as globally, really.
I mean,
Okay,
with Reza
yeah.
Pahlavi,
Okay, it's actually, you know what? The next question, I'll make a quick comment because I think where Owen continues here is also important. But yeah, this guy is talking about what the Iranian people want and what they don't want. And again, you have to remember this person is not a spokesperson for the Iranian people. He's a de facto, if not official, spokesperson for the Iranian regime. And you can see that again throughout this whole interview. He's doing it in the style that he's doing it by going after the people who are against the regime. But again, there's a reason for that, and this is what he chooses to do with his time on this video.
Yeah, we can go. I kind of zoned out from listening to them, so I have no idea what they even said, so we can listen a bit more.
You missed out, but yeah.
He was obviously the son of the deposed Shah, and it must be, of course, remembered that Shah of Iran, oversaw an extremely brutal regime, which was overwhelmingly opposed by the Iranian people. I mean, obviously, the mass disillusionment that was bred by that regime led to a revolution. So, I mean, which did have huge support at the time in 1979, 1980, and so on. 1978, 79. With Reza Pahlavi, I'm interested in his incarnation in terms of how he's presenting himself, because my understanding is, particularly a lot of the people around him, he's kind of got closer to basically kind of far right Trumpian elements. Is that correct? And when he talks about a constitutional monarchy, although I don't know how much his rhetoric is along those lines anymore, it used to be. Do you think in practice, actually, he would just end up being
okay? He talks about constitutional monarchy. That's the last thing he said. He talks about constitutional monarchy, although I don't know how much of that is his current views. This is interesting because Owen seems to know a lot about Reza Pahlavi, and he doesn't know that this is not what he's saying now. He is talking about some form of democracy. So it's Owen seems to know that this guy is far right, Trumpian. He uses all the words that people like that troll in the chat, would listen to and go, "Oh my God, he's far right. Yeah, whatever they have now must be better." He also, he mentions the Shah and how he was a brutal dictator, extremely brutal regime, were his exact words, never used to describe the current regime that is currently shooting at the protesters that he is claiming are, far right or Israel supporting. He said the revolution had huge support. Well, okay, this is where Owen lies by leaving stuff out, and there was a widespread opposition to the Shah. Many people wanted to remove him. Among those people were people who share Owen's ideology of Marxism, who were then massacred by the regime that replaced it. So, you can mention that rather than saying it in a way that makes it sound kind of like this regime is actually popular among the people, and it's only the Israel sponsored agitators who make us think otherwise.
Yeah, I pretty much had the same points. Like, yeah, talking about the brutality of Shah and ignoring the brutality of the current regime shows the bias or shows the preference from Owen. And yeah, the fact that, yeah, the revolution in a sense was a popular one in the term of in the sense of like a popular front where it was Islamist, socialist, and pretty much any anti-monarchist sentiments grouping together to overthrow the regime. And then, as it always happens with totalitarian revolutions, one side massacres the others. That's what happened in Soviet Union. That's what happened in, I mean, in Germany when the Nazis took over, right? That's what happens in every single totalitarian takeover. You take over, and then, what's the quote? Revolution eats its children. That's always what happens. The people needed to take over the state are not the same as people who you need to keep the state in charge.
Much more entrenched in this Venezuelan system, both in respect to like the economic damage that it has received. I mean, Venezuela, which was much further along economic collapse than Iran has, even now. Like they were in hyperinflation, for example, where Iran was like 40% in inflation, and they're adjusting subsidies and trying to give vouchers and redirect some, their kind of social safety nets and welfare system. And they have multiple layers of control in Iran. So Khamenei, is the figurehead, is kind of a consensus figure, but really the main powers, the Revolutionary Guards, various security bodies, political bodies, entrenched interests groups, and elites who have a lot to lose if the current system falls apart. They, they have all the guns, they have the resources, so they have a lot of means to kind of hold out. And so, I mean, basically, I think, and in this question of if he assassinates Khamenei and tries to make a deal with some other element of the system who could be more pragmatic, or at least come to some terms like, hey, we won't enrich, we're not going to bother Israel, you lift sanctions, let's make a deal. I mean, I guess that's plausible. I just think that, Khamenei is more like Khamenei and his kind of level, his loyalists and his kind of base, and him being kind of, one of the original 1979 revolutionary leaders, makes that calculation more complicated. Did
he stop himself from saying Khamenei has more integrity, than the vice president of Venezuela? That's interesting. By the way, it's a fear of mine that Trump might actually do something and just do what he's doing in Venezuela and let some elements of the current government stay in power, which of course defeats the purpose, even if you get some sort of promise. But he started, by the way, at the beginning of that last clip we saw by saying Khamenei is a consensus leader. So again, like, at times there's very...
Wait, consensus of whom? Other ayatollahs?
That's a question that the person just asking questions didn't ask. But Khamenei is a consensus leader. He has too much integrity to deal with Trump. We see where this is going, or where this is.
Yeah, well, my favorite part was how Venezuela was in bad situation. Iran has 40% inflation, as if like that's like a normal thing. 40% inflation. You're not doing that bad. You only have 40% inflation. Like that's insane. You cannot deal with you cannot sustain a regime on 40% inflation for that long. I mean, how much was? How much? I think Argentina was in hundreds of percent, was it? Before Milei took over, or it was already going down a bit. I can't remember exactly. But then it's not necessarily like a regime you can keep in charge for that long. And both, and this goes hand in hand, right? Especially if you're export-heavy economy, both inflation and also having the currency problems, that the currency is also losing value, which makes exports much more insane. That's why this revolt started at bazaars, because like The prices are insane. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about this.
Well, they know what else to say, so let's listen to some more of them.
Okay, we can watch this.
It's not really that big of a deal. Just like they deal with dictators all around the world and prop them up or support Israel. It's, genocidal expansionist state.
I mean, just in terms of that, the role of Israel, and also, well, obviously Israel and bombed Iran, and there was a 12-day war between the two countries last year. As you say, openly talking about interfering. And you can see a strategy across the Middle East. Some would argue that what they would prefer is chaos in Iran. They're not to be a properly functioning government. Iran is a rich tapestry, ethnically, demographically, and so on. And there's the spectre of balkanization. What do you think about that? I mean, the role of Israel, and then just the more broader general threat of balkanization, civil war, for example.
Yeah, I would. I mean, from my vantage point in Washington and, conversations that I've had with, American officials, ex-officials, people who know the Israeli thinking. I mean, I would argue that the Israeli regional interest, and I think this is very evident, obviously, in their policies, what they've done, their rhetoric, is for the region to be fragmented largely along ethnic and sectarian lines, and to not have any strong states with strong centralized governments. We can see this playing out right now in Syria, where they're trying to push very hard for the fragmentation of Syria. Obviously, they just unilaterally recognized Somaliland and, tearing apart Somalia, tearing apart, which is an Arab League member in the Arab world.
Okay.
vis-a-vis,
No, what? Wait, hang on. Okay. First of all, Owen Jones with the question. Maybe we should have paused there, but hindsight. Yeah. Owen Jones talks about the rich tapestry when he mentions, the fact that that Iran could break up into all these mini tribes and, the balkanization. The balkanization is already there. It's built into the culture, and it's, by the way, not as bad as in the countries, the other countries in the Middle East. This is what primitive societies do. So, yeah, that is not something that what is currently happening is you have an oppressive regime that oppresses all these different groups that unoppressed by a central government in Tehran might become their own little oppressive countries. But how you go from that to blaming Israel for what? Iranian culture, the different cultures in Iran? What exactly are you blaming Israel for there? And remind me what he said at the end, because I didn't want to comment on that.
Somaliland.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Again, that's such a. I'm not a fan of diplomacy in general, but within the context of a field that I would rather see, not really taken seriously, this was a brilliant move. What Israel recognized Somaliland unilaterally tearing up Somalia? No, if you look at Somalia that is Somalia minus Somaliland, it is tearing itself up because of that tribalism and balkanization. And Somaliland, again, also a tribalistic culture, is surprisingly, for such a culture, surprisingly civilized, with a government with multiple transitions of power in its 34-year history, peaceful transitions of power after elections, and it really is amazing. If you care about the rights of individuals wherever they are, you would hope for, Somalia to be under the rule of something like what Somaliland is under. But these people don't care about the rights of individuals. They care about the rights of those who oppress individuals. They care about totalitarian regimes, and specifically, they care about the totalitarian regimes that dedicate their resources to the killing of Jews and to the elimination of the Jewish state.
Yeah, and like look at any sort of like map of Somalia, right? You have the sort of like the government of Somalia, then you have the cancer of Al-Shabaab, spreading all over the place in weird directions. Then you have Puntland in the north, the sort of like autonomous stuff, and then one integral Somaliland that is not even involved in the Somali civil war because it's not part of Somalia, because it's a separate thing that has been a separate thing for decades now. It's like the same thing when people like try to, and this is what happens when you go after with like the idea of international law being the main thing, as one of the person was saying. Because yeah, according to international law, Somaliland is a split away state uh, that is illegal because Somalia didn't consent to the secession of Somaliland, which makes the secession illegal. Although the people in Somaliland are voting for Somaliland elections, are participating in that thing. Somaliland has the monopoly on the exercise of force because they managed to actually abolish the militias. So they actually managed to sort of like grab the central control for one state, which is what you need to have, monopoly on retaliatory force to basically be able to properly rule or sort of like govern a state, so you don't have random gangs trying to shoot everybody over. And yeah, that's something bad. And also, Israel is the one who balkanized Somalia. Israel is the one who balkanized Syria. Like, give me a break. Like, both of those were a mess, even without Israeli involvement.
Thank you, Frank, for the super chat. Frank says, Razi, challenge Owen to a debate on Iran and Israel. Uh, well, first of all, no, thanks. But also, he would never do something like that. Why? And why would he? He is a household name, and very few people know who we are. And I'm not a debater. I think people who have seen my attempts at debating on this channel will probably agree. But I would win that debate, without much difficulty, just because Owen's content depends on nobody asking questions, nobody picking any of it apart. Uh, and so, yeah, even if we had an audience the size of Owen's audience or bigger, and he had an actual reason, in terms of growing his audience, he would not do this. So, yeah, not. Not going to happen. For me, and I've mentioned this before, like I wouldn't waste my time on trying to convince somebody like that in real life. There is a different purpose to debates. So being on stage or in front of an audience of people who might be more active-minded, to use Ayn Rand's words, that might have its value, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I would say on that, I generally don't like debates. I don't even like really watching debates anymore because there's never really something that happens. Usually, like, and people who watch debates just admit that you watch them for entertainment. Like that's usually why people watch it. There's not much that ever comes out of them. When I go for a discussion, and for a proper discussion, you need some common ground with the other person. And the most important thing, you have to believe that the other person is coming from a good place. If you don't have a common ground, or you don't think the other person is coming from a good place, you cannot have a discussion, right? And I don't think Owen Jones is coming from a good place, and I have no idea what even the common like a common ground would for both of us to be. He doesn't seem to believe that Western states are even good. I don't think he believes in the existence of the state of Israel as it is right now, or probably in any form. So again, I don't know. I don't know whether we would like really get. But if there was like someone having problem with what Israel is doing and was possibly coming from a good place, I would be up to like have a conversation. Probably not like public, because again, that turns it kind of into debate. But
Yeah. Speaking of things we don't do here, although sometimes I wish we did, is yeah, since we're a family show, Chandler, I'm not going to read your comment, but I did find it funny, but maybe that's the problem with my sense of humor. All right, Daniel is now busy trying to see what comment I'm referring to. Okay, let's let's watch some more of this clip.
So they're not on board with, they want to kind of federalize, pluralistic future Iran, which is not what Pahlavi's supporters now say. Like online, like they're very dogmatic, and they have their own form of kind of Iranian nationalism that is very exclusionary as well, I would argue. Regardless, for Israel, I think this plays into that Balkanization aspiration. And for Iran, that is, engulfed in internal turmoil for years, decades, couple generations, is perfectly fine for them. As a small state that is an ethno-supremacist state themselves, that is expansionist, that these big countries in the region as potential strategic rivals, even if the Islamic Republic goes, who's going to emerge ultimately, who could emerge later. So I think their interest is ultimately in that kind of fragmentation of the region, not just Iran. And we can see this, in Libya. Libya was, for better or for worse, one of the more powerful countries in North Africa, and right now just been locked in civil war and discord for the past 15 years, for various reasons. I'm not trying to necessarily blame, say.
Okay, yeah, I'm not trying to. You, much like Tucker, you're not trying to, but you are. Yeah, dogmatic is what he called, I believe, Pahlavi's supporters. Israel is worried. This guy used the word rivals, strategic rivals. We saw the previous guy say, he didn't want Syria to pose a challenge. Again, these are countries that the challenge they want to pose is to the existence of the state of Israel. And Israel doesn't want to pose a similar challenge to any of them beyond the extent to which they promise to work as a regime for the elimination of the state of Israel and the killing of everybody who lives there. So, yeah, the wording is important because they're trying to still talk to a Western audience, and they're trying to convince this Western audience that the only beachhead of Western civilization in the Middle East is the problem, and the most oppressive regime in the region, and one of the most oppressive regimes in the world, is actually not that bad, and the people trying to take it down are certainly much worse than it is. And at the very end, he throws in a good word for Gaddafi, just for good measure.
Well, at least, he held a unified, because that's what he's saying. Like, at least it's unified authoritarian state rather than a bunch of, which I guess in some ways it might be preferable for people living there. And yeah, he sort of like goes to, I'm not trying to say, but yeah, you are trying to say. I mean, what else is? I don't really have anything more to add. I'm kind of
Well, then let's listen to the next clip.
lost.
The American interest would be in terms of like keeping that future Iran closer to it, having a balance where neither that future Iran or the Gulf countries or any other regional power can have a dominating position in the Persian Gulf, and yet they're not going in the Chinese camp or the Russian camp or in this emerging multipolar order, so to prevent inroads from them. But I think that's different than the Israeli interest completely, which is not having regional integration in line with kind of American preferences or anything like that, but having instability and fragmentation, so them as an ethno-supremacist state that is expansionist could have long-term security and kind of expansion in this region.
Just finally, if you were going to predict,
okay, yeah, so ethno-supremacist, expansionist, yeah, he uses, again, they use all the words that they can that make Israel sound bad, and none of them to describe the regime. And they're also, of course, trying to tell us that American interests are different from Israel. I mean, America is obviously very bad. It's America, but it's not as bad as the Jews. America just wants to keep Russia and China out, and I'm sure both these guys do not want to see that. But Israel actually wants fragmentation and wants, wants Iran to be weak, and doesn't care about what happens there. And again, I repeat, it's not the job of Israel It is the job of the Iranian people to remove that regime. It is the job of Israel to protect its own citizens from the death to Israel part of the official slogan of the Iranian regime, which was not mentioned in either of those videos, from materializing.
Yeah, here I would only add sort of, he was saying, you have to keep Iran sort of locked. Israel prefers instability and fragmentation. Of course it does, because unity with Arab state means they are going to destroy Israel. Whenever Arab states have unified behind common goal, it was to destroy Israel, as I mentioned earlier in the show. Either the War of Independence or 67 or Yom Kippur, or I mean, even Hamas and Hezbollah, right, was trying to work together to destroy Israel. Whenever Arab states unify, whenever Arab groups unify, they use it to destroy Israel. Even Iran, right? Once the revolution happened, once they got, the power was internalized, they grabbed the power. Now we can go after the little Satan. Now we can go after Israel finally.
Yeah, look, with the Owen Joneses of the world, it's always important to remember that part that, Arab society and Muslim society elsewhere, including in Iran, although it is much better than the Arab countries, um, is uh, what it is. It is not what the Owen Joneses are telling us it is. It's not primitive because of Israel. It's not fragmented because of Israel. It's fragmented because of the tribalism that was always a part of that culture, and doesn't always have to be, because culture is the man-made. It's not the metaphysically given. Um, but yeah, the only problem, again, the only problem these people are pointing to in the Middle East is the only sliver of civilization, of rights respecting. I again recommend people that troll left the chat, but look through, what she was saying, and it started from civil rights, human rights, and so on, and it went on to, why the only rights respecting country in the world should be removed, and at some point, some argument about in some universities, Iranian women have been able to walk around without a veil and they were fine. So yeah, the advocates, so-called advocates of human rights, are telling you that the murderous regime of Iran is actually not that bad, whether it's Owen Jones, Owen Jones's guests, Owen Jones's fans. If you are, shooting protesters, shooting women for, showing their hair, throwing gay people off of buildings for being gay, uh, that's all fine as long as you are against genocide, apartheid, uh, ethno-nationalism, and whatever else words they throw at Israel. Daniel, parting thoughts?
Yeah, I would probably finish with what I've started with basically is that whenever you look at sort of where somebody's coming from, or where what kind of worldview somebody, or what somebody's trying to inform you of, try to ask yourself what kind of world do they want to see. And with Owen, I don't even want to think about what kind of the world wants to see, but I'll say mine. I want to see every state to be free. I want every government to respect the individual rights of their own citizens, and that's the kind of world I'm trying to work to. And whenever I analyze the situation, I'm trying to do it with that in mind, not in terms of which government has a right to do something, or what does international law say, or whatever group we are thinking about. No, it's individuals first and foremost, and the respects of their rights thereof. Somebody says I'm from Bratislava, which
I was
I
gonna say yes, Daniel is from Bratislava. Trolls in the chat, go look for him there. That is where he is, on the
it's a
mean
big
streets of
country.
Bratislava. And yeah, should we at the 90, is it 94-minute mark of this
About
30-minute show, should we call it?
well, we don't have any more clips, so
Well, that is a good time to call it. By the way, yeah, watching Owen Jones is not fun, but needs to be done. watching some television shows and movies is often a lot more fun. And that's why we launched our new channel, The Cultural Review, where you can watch the first video we did so far, which is our review of the show Pluribus on Apple TV and its first season. Videos will be posted there weekly. That is the plan. So make sure you subscribe to that channel. Link is in the chat and in the description. And make sure you watch that first video, although it is full of spoilers. So if you've not watched Pluribus and intend to, you should watch Pluribus first and then watch this. If you're not planning to watch it, you might want to watch this video anyway, that we, touch on the different themes that might be interesting. Uh, Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody, for watching. The Daily Objective returns tomorrow.